There was only one person that talked to me that day, and he's been in my life ever since, and he was my earliest mentor and influence. His name is John, and John is the one who this story relates to because he has a very unconventional teaching style. Our first coffee and interaction, John came and he slapped a dice on the table. And this is not unusual, a start for our coffee conversation, so I'm like, okay, I'm playing along here. And he says, what can you see? I said, a dice, John. And he said, be more specific. And I said, well, I can see a 1. And he said, well, I can see a 6. Which one of us is right? And I said, we both are. And he said, bingo. He said, one of the things I want you to learn and take in early in your leadership career is firstly, that we only ever by default have one side of the dice in view when we come to make a decision. And great leaders always think about how many sides of the dice can I get into view before I decide. They intentionally seek out other sides of the dice because they're equally accurate perspectives on what's going on. There's no more or less validity in their opinion necessarily versus ours, and it's important to consider them. But the second thing, and some in the room will need to hear this too, and I did in that moment too, just because there are other sides of the dice does not mean yours is any less valid. And actually the contribution is less, the conversation is less, the solution is less if your side of the dice isn't up for consideration. If you haven't spoken up and shared your perspective and made sure that's there for discussion and conversation. So today I want us to play with the idea of the dice a little bit. And I'm going to give us a little model to do it. We talked about future-proofing, and I want to provoke a conversation a little bit and get your perspectives flowing around the future. This is one way that I would conceive of some of the forces that we're having contend with in leadership at this moment. We're having to work with new technology. I'm not going to get up here and talk about ChatGPT and all range of generative AI and these sorts of things that are entering our world at a rate of knots, or how we had to survive for all those years entirely virtually in ways that we couldn't have even fathomed in 2019. But we know technology is accelerating around us. There's an element of that that's coming and connecting with the new humanism. We've got hybrid work in a way we've never seen it before. It's challenging us around the boundaries of what are human skills versus technological skills. What's interesting to me when you look at the World Economic Forum report for 2030, 7 of the top 10 skills are soft skills. 7 of the most in-demand skills they're saying the world will need are actually soft skills, effectively the things the robots can't out-human us on. And so it's interesting, this discussion we're getting into now around what are we training and educating people in? What are the downside consequences of the disruption that feels like it's hastening its pace? 10 years ago in the G20, we were talking about the future of work and the automation of jobs, and we were almost exclusively talking about that from a blue-collar standpoint. We're now very much entering the domain of white-collar rationalisation of work and thinking of workforce structures and the like. So we're entering a really different domain in that regard. And many of you will follow this, and we'll talk about it a little bit more in a moment, but we've changed the story we're telling, right? We've talked about purpose for about 10 years. We're finding that the demands in the attention economy of being sharper and shorter in our messaging is there. We're needing to think about elements of society in a way that we maybe hadn't prefaced or preferenced in our messaging prior. So what I would love you to do is bring in some different sides of the dice at your table this morning. When you look at this from your worldview, what jumps out as a challenge, what jumps out as an opportunity? Have a conversation and get some different sides of the dice perspective on when you think about your role at work, what you do day in, day out, who you're helping. How does this challenge? How does this present new opportunities? Have a chat and then we'll come back. Go for it.